I'm Alex Howard, and welcome to this video. And thank you for downloading our free information pack. It's a great way of finding out more about the approach at the Optimum Health Clinic, how we may be able to help support you on the path to recovery. Also gives you access to our feature documentary following 3 patients on their journey to recovery. In this video, though, I wanted to tell you a little bit about my journey to recovery and a little bit about the story behind the Optimum Health Clinic, because I think that's important in understanding how we may be able to help support you to know the place that we've come from and some of the key guiding principles that have really defined our approach to chronic fatigue, ME, and fibromyalgia. So my own journey with chronic fatigue, ME, started just before I turned 16. And I was just finishing doing my GCSEs, which are a set of exams we do here in the UK. And one morning I woke up and I literally felt like if there was a plug of energy into my body, that someone had pulled out the plug. I felt completely exhausted. I felt dizzy and spaced out. And I felt like I kind of had a flu or something like that. I should confess, I'd actually been out drinking with friends the night before, which is not something to be doing at 15 years old, but I'd been finishing my exams. And I wondered if I was hungover. But as that day continued into a few weeks, I didn't feel any better. So I ended up going to the doctor. And I was told that I probably had a virus of some sort. And then that became 3 months. And in 3 months, the only thing that really changed is my mood. I started to get a lot more despondent and frustrated because when you're 16 years old, being virtually housebound and at times bedbound for several months on end with no real explanation of what's happening is pretty frustrating and pretty difficult. After a while, 3 months became 4, 5, 6 months. And in the end, I was with our doctor, and my grandmother said, could it be chronic fatigue ME? I had no reference point of what chronic fatigue ME was. I just knew a teacher at the school that I'd been at that had had to rest a lot and seemed to miss a lot of time teaching. I was then given the diagnosis. The doctor said, yes, I think that is what it is. And I was given that diagnosis. And very quickly I realized it was bad news. And I said, well, how long till I'm better? And the doctor said, well, I think you'll probably be okay within 6 months. Now, when you've been already ill for 4, 5, 6 months at 16 years old, you're hardly able to get out of the house, feeling utter exhaustion, the kind of exhaustion that you'd imagine if you hadn't slept for days, but sleep had no impact on. Feeling constant muscle pains and feeling dizzy. I'd get up and try and walk and I felt like I was going to fall over. The experience like that and then being told it's going to be another 6 months feels like a lifetime when you're 16 years old. You know, when you get a bit older, 6 months seems like a kind of shorter period of time, but at that time it felt like a bit of a death sentence in a sense. But I just assumed, well, look, I've just got to get through this, and at the end of 6 months, I'm going to be fine. As those months unfolded, I didn't improve. And then I got to being ill for a year, nothing had changed. Another year went past. And after 2 years of being seriously chronically ill and not being able to continue any of my hobbies, I used to love playing guitar in a band. I couldn't do that anymore. I used to love playing sport. I couldn't do that anymore. The girlfriend that I'd had when I first got ill was long gone. I started to get pretty depressed. And also I started to have a lot of anxiety. And anxiety, not because I was necessarily anxious by nature, but I had all these symptoms and no one could tell me what was wrong with me, why it was wrong with me, what I should do about it. And I'd been told that I'd be better in 6 months and I was as bad as I'd ever been. I also started to feel pretty depressed. And I wasn't tired because I was depressed because I was tired. In fact, if you'd said to me at the time that my symptoms were because I was depressed and anxious and that's why I had all these symptoms, I would have said to you, but generally speaking with depression, by the way, depression of course is a very valid experience of its own. It's just different to the experience that I had. But with depression, often the instinct is people want to crawl into bed and hide away from the world. I wanted to come out of bed. I desperately wanted to live my life, to go and see my friends, to go and play sport. I just couldn't do those things. And so after a couple of years of being in this situation, I started to get incredibly desperate. And I ended up having a conversation with somebody who was close to me. It was my uncle. And he was a little bit like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. He wasn't there very often. but he always seemed to turn up at just the right time, and he always seemed to say just the right thing before he disappeared back off into the sunset again. And we had this conversation where he basically said to me, how badly do you want to be well? Like, what would you do to get your health back? And I thought about it, and I thought, well, I probably wouldn't chop off one of my limbs. But apart from that, I would do literally anything to get my life back. So I was like a 9.5 out of 10. And then he asked me to make a list of all the things that I thought I could do in the average day that would facilitate my recovery. And I wrote down on that list things like learning more about nutrition. I noticed I had some digestive symptoms that were going on. To perhaps learn to calm my mind. I'd heard about things like meditation and yoga. To read some books, to try and educate myself more about the situation that I was in. So I made this list of things I thought I could do to help myself. He then asked me to make a list of all the things that I thought made me feel worse. And that list only had one word on it. It was life. Literally just felt like trying to get through the day was a massive stress in of itself. He then said to me, so how many hours, if you're a 9.5 out of 10, how many hours a day do you spend doing the things that you yourself believe could make a difference? And I thought about it, and the answer was virtually none. And he then said to me, well, how many hours a day do you spend watching television? And I was counting up, EastEnders and Neighbours and Home and Away, and these are all the kind of English soap operas that were on TV in those days. Maybe they still are. And I think it was something like 7-8 hours a day I was spending watching TV. Now, of course, my defense was that I couldn't do much else. I would kind of get up and I would lie on the sofa, I'd watch telly, I'd try and do a little bit of school work at home, and then I'd lie on the sofa some more, and I'd try and go to school for an hour or two, then lie on the sofa some more. And so watching TV kind of became like my companion, became like my friend. But I couldn't get away from the fact that I was saying I was a 9.5 out of 10. I would do almost anything for my situation to change. I had a list of things I could start off doing, and I wasn't doing them. In fact, at this point, I was nearly 18 years old, and I virtually had a PhD in soap operas. I knew everything that was happening in all the soap operas. I'd often watch them on repeat and then watch the omnibus edition on a Sunday. But it was very easy for me to say, well, who am I to change this? Who am I to think that I could have answers to recovery from something that it seemed like the world's leading experts didn't have answers to? But I did have one thing on my side. I had two things on my side, actually. I had time. I had plenty of time. I had 7-8 hours a day I was watching TV. Now, I couldn't be active all those hours, but I could listen to audio programs. I could read books. The other thing I had on my side is I had naivety. And I had that thing when you're young. And there's a part of you that believes that you can do anything, that you can change the world. And I just somehow found this place where I started to believe that maybe I could find a way out of the situation that I was in. And so I made some commitments to myself that I would spend 30 minutes, and then it became an hour a day practicing meditation, that I would start to do 3 or 4 minutes a day of yoga, which was literally just lying on the floor and just doing some very gentle kind of movements and breathing exercises. I couldn't do any more than that. And I started to read books. And then after a while, books became like my drug. And it was like suddenly something awakened inside of me that I was so desperate for this situation to be different. And I had this little glimpse of a way out, that I started reading and practicing and exploring nutrition like a madman, basically. And without going into details of the story, and it's kind of, the story is catalogued in my first book, which was Why Me? My Journey from ME to Health and Happiness. I spent 5 years reading literally hundreds of books on nutrition and health and medicine and psychology, doing thousands of hours of meditation and yoga, seeing dozens and dozens of different practitioners, traditional medical practitioners, alternative practitioners. At one point, I was taking something like 65, 70 supplements a day, something that I wouldn't recommend people do, but I was just so desperate to find a way out. And some things helped, and some things didn't help. Some things made me a lot worse. Some things made no difference, and some things were mini breakthroughs. But for me on the recovery path, there was no one miracle answer. And when I eventually did find my way to recovery, and I wrote a book about it, I had also been training in psychology. And it's certainly not that psychology was the answer, but psychology helped me have the attitude, and it certainly helped me impact on my nervous system and get my body into a healing state whilst doing other things. And so I set up the Optimum Health Clinic to help other people with chronic fatigue and ME, fibromyalgia as well, which is a different illness, but it's also related, and many of the things that we use for chronic fatigue and ME, we also find effective for fibromyalgia, and we also have a separate protocol there. And almost overnight, the Optimum Health Clinic became incredibly busy, and I took on some more practitioners, and we trained, and really the core value at the heart of that organization, this organization, has always been that there is no one answer. And effectively, we're truth seekers, and we're constantly researching and testing different things that work for different people. And that's given us some amazing maps, some amazing protocols. And the more people we work with, the more clarity we get from doing that. And over the years since then, it's now 13 years since the Optimum Health Clinic started, we now have a team of getting on for 20 practitioners in a psychology department and nutrition department. We do a lot of work with people by telephone and video Skype that are unable to travel to where we are in London, or they're based internationally. And patients, as I mentioned earlier, in many, many countries. And constantly at the heart of the Optimum Health Clinic approach has been really what I lived in my own experience. Patients need to be engaged in the recovery process, but we try to take some of the trial and error out of it for them. So whereas I was trying so many different things, having the knowledge and experience we have, having worked with so many different people, we can help shortcut that significantly for many people that we work with. We also have this real commitment to research. Having had publications in the British Medical Journal Open, Medical Hypothesis, Psychology and Health, Journal of Integral Theory and Practice. And that's really because we're absolutely committed to building the evidence base behind the work that we do. Lack of evidence doesn't mean something is disproven. It means that the research often hasn't been done. And that's why 3.5 years ago, the Optimum Health Clinic became a registered charity. So any profit we make in the organization goes directly into funding research. And at this point, we're doing a randomized controlled trial with the University of Surrey on the entire Optimum Health Clinic approach to follow on from the British Medical Journal Open study, which was published several years ago, which found statistically significant improvement in all our intervention treatment groups. So if you're watching this and you yourself are affected by chronic fatigue, ME, fibromyalgia, I don't sit here and claim to have all the answers, but I do feel I can passionately, hand on heart, say that having worked with literally thousands of people with these conditions, we've had some amazing results and some significant results, and we've helped many, many people. And so if you'd like to find out more about how we may be able to support and work with you, then you can request a free 15-minute chat. And the way that process will work is you send us your details, and one of our new patient coordinators will contact you, and they'll spend some time on the phone exploring and understanding your journey and experience. Explain a little bit about how we may be able to help and support you on your path to recovery. And then they will book you a 15-minute chat with one of our psychology team and one of our nutrition team, or either or, whichever you and we feel would be most appropriate. And then you can actually spend some time with one of our practitioners. Those calls, they're not mini consultations. We don't start recommending supplements. We need to go much more detailed into your case to do that. But it's also not a sales call. It's not an opportunity for us to say, well, if you sign up now, well, it's simply an exploratory conversation. We genuinely believe that if it's obvious to us and obvious to you that we can help you, then you will want to follow through on that. There's no pressure. There's no driving someone to make a decision. It's simply giving information. And it's important to say that around half the clinic team have themselves had ME chronic fatigue and recovered. They've been patients of the organization. And I think our commitment to the real heart and essence of the lived experience of ME chronic fatigue, whilst also having an absolute commitment to research and the highest possible standard of practitioners, is why we were recognized in a parliamentary review last year of one of the UK's leading examples of outstanding practice in medicine in this country. So if you want to find out more, please do request a free 15-minute chat. We would love to hear your story and see if we can support you on your path to recovery. Thanks for watching.